They sold my home while I was in the hospital, but one signature changed everything. Before I tell you what happened, take a second to tell me where you're watching from and what time it is right now. I love seeing your comments from all over. It makes me feel a little less alone. And if you're new here, please subscribe to my channel, Her Revenge Stories. You won't want to miss what I'm about to tell you. My name is Eleanor Brooks. I'm 74 years old, and for most of my life, I thought I'd raised a good family. I grew up in Iowa, married young, and worked at a local bank for 30 years before I retired. My husband, Frank, passed away 8 years ago. After that, the house we built together, a white two-story with blue shutters and a maple tree out front, became my world. Every memory I had of him lived in those walls. The smell of his pipe tobacco still lingered in his chair, and sometimes, when the wind rattled the windows just right, I could almost hear him whistling down the hall. I never imagined anyone could take that away from me. But that was before the surgery. It started with a sharp pain in my stomach one evening while I was watering my rose bushes. My daughter, Denise, insisted I go to the hospital just to be safe. I remember her tone, more impatient than worried. She and her husband, Paul, had been hinting for months that I should move into a smaller place. "You don't need all this space, Mom," she'd say, running her finger across the dusty piano I rarely touched anymore. "Wouldn't it be nice to live somewhere simpler?" But I wasn't ready to leave. That house wasn't just bricks and wood. It was my life's work, my safe place. At the hospital, they told me it was appendicitis, and because of my age, the doctors recommended immediate surgery. I signed the consent forms with shaky hands and called Denise to let her know. She arrived an hour later, wearing a blazer like she'd just left work, and kissed me on the forehead. "Don't worry, Mom. Paul and I will handle everything. You just focus on getting better." I didn't think much of it at the time. When you're lying in a hospital bed, hooked to monitors that beep like clockwork, you want to believe your family's got your back. I trusted her completely. The surgery went fine, though recovery was slower than expected. I spent 6 days in the hospital, mostly alone except for the occasional nurse checking vitals or a volunteer offering me tea. Denise visited twice, both times rushing off with calls about the realtor and paperwork. I thought she meant her own business. She worked in property management after all. It wasn't until the 5th night that I overheard something that made my stomach twist worse than the stitches. 2 nurses were talking outside my room. One of them mentioned that the Brooks place finally sold, that big one on Elm Street. My heart froze. That was my address. When they came in to check my I asked, casually, pretending it was small talk, "Did you say the Brooks house sold?" The younger nurse smiled politely. "Oh, I think so, ma'am. The listing came down this morning. It's a beautiful home. I drive by it on my way to work." I felt my chest tighten. There must have been a mistake. Maybe she meant a different Brooks. I tried to sleep that night, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw Frank standing on the porch, shaking his head in silence. The next morning, Denise came by, holding a coffee she didn't offer me. She looked cheerful, too cheerful. I waited until she set her purse down before I asked, "Denise, someone told me the Brooks house on Elm sold. That isn't my house, right?" Her face changed, just a flicker, then she smiled too quickly. "Mom, listen. You were in surgery and things happen fast. We got an offer, and it was too good to pass up. You'll thank me later. We're moving you into a nice condo downtown, no stairs, no maintenance. It's perfect for you." I remember the world tilting around me. "You sold my home?" My voice barely made it past my throat. "Without asking me?" She sighed, exasperated, like I was being unreasonable. "Mom, you were under anesthesia. You couldn't handle the stress. And I had power of attorney. You signed it last year, remember? It's all legal." I did remember signing something, but it was supposed to be for medical decisions, not real estate. I never authorized her to sell the house. My hands trembled as I gripped the blanket. "You had no right," I whispered. "Mom," she said sharply, lowering her voice, "don't start this. The money's in your account. It's what's best. You'll see once you're out of here." She gathered her things and left before I could speak again. The door closed behind her with a click that sounded final, like the slamming of a vault. The rest of that day felt like walking through fog. I couldn't stop replaying our conversation. Had I missed something? Was she right? Had I given her that kind of power without realizing it? I tried to remember the documents, a few pages she'd brought over after Frank's funeral, saying they were just for emergencies. I trusted her enough not to read every line. That night, a nurse offered me sleeping pills, but I refused. My mind was too loud for rest. I watched the clock tick past midnight and thought about the maple tree out front, the one Frank and I planted the year Denise was born. It would be someone else's tree now. By morning, I made a decision. If Denise could sell my house while I was lying helpless in a hospital bed, then I wasn't as powerless as she thought. I called the only person I knew who might help, Mr. Hanley, our old family attorney. He'd handled Frank's will years ago. He answered on the second ring, his voice calm and gravelly. "Eleanor? It's been ages. How are you holding up?" "Not well," I admitted. "They sold my home, Tom. Denise, she did it while I was in here. She said I gave her power of attorney." He went quiet for a moment. "That doesn't sound right. The document I drafted for you is medical only. She can make healthcare decisions, not financial ones. Do you have any copies?" "No," I said. "She keeps all the paperwork in her home office." "Don't worry," he said gently. "Everything leaves a trail. I'll look into it first thing in the morning. Rest for now." I felt a flicker of relief, the first since this nightmare began. Maybe it wasn't over. Maybe one signature really could change everything. The next few hours passed in slow motion. I watched sunlight move across the hospital floor like a clock's hand. Nurses came and went. The smell of antiseptic filled the air. I thought about all the years I'd spent saving for that home, the wallpaper Frank and I had picked out, the creak in the stairs I'd always meant to fix. When Denise called later that afternoon, her tone was light. "Hey, Mom, I just stopped by the condo. You'll love it. The view is great." "Did you sell everything?" asked, keeping my voice calm. She hesitated. "Most of it. We had to. The buyers wanted the place furnished." I gripped the phone so tight my knuckles ached. "You sold my furniture?" "My husband's things." "Mom, please don't get emotional," she said. "This is a fresh start. You'll have new furniture. Nicer, even." I could hear someone in the background, probably Paul, say something about deposit cleared. I felt my stomach churn. "Denise," I said quietly, "you've gone too far." "Mom, stop," she said sharply. "You'll see. Everything's fine." Then the line went dead. After that call, I sat in silence for a long time. I thought about how trust can vanish in a single breath, about how the people you love most can treat you like a problem to solve instead of a person. When Mr. Hanley called back that evening, his voice sounded different, sharper, alert. "Eleanor, I checked the county records," he said. "The deed transfer was filed 3 days ago. But your signature looks odd. Not your usual handwriting. I'd like you to come by once you're discharged. We'll get a handwriting expert if we have to." I felt a tear slip down my cheek. "Do you think she forged it?" "I can't say for sure yet," he replied. "But if she did, we'll prove it. The original power of attorney doesn't authorize property sales. If she used it that way, the sale's invalid. We'll start there." For the first time in days, I smiled. A small, tired smile, but real. Maybe Denise thought she'd written me off. But she forgot one thing. I spent 30 years at a bank. I know what a signature means. And she was about to learn that, too. When I finally got discharged later that morning, the air outside felt almost too fresh. After a week of hospital air, it stung my lungs in a good way. The nurse helped me into the cab, and I asked the driver to take me straight to my old lawyer's office. My hands were trembling the whole ride, not from weakness, but from the anger I'd been swallowing for days. Tom Hanley's office sat in an old brick building near the courthouse, same as it had for decades. When I stepped inside, the scent of old paper and lemon polish hit me. I'd forgotten how comforting that smell was, like time stood still there. Tom stood when he saw me, a bit grayer than I remembered, but still wearing those same tweed jackets he loved. "Eleanor," he said warmly, "you look tired, but I'm glad to see you up." "I feel like I've aged 10 years in a week," I admitted as I sat down. He nodded. I looked through what I could find on short notice. The deed transfer was recorded 2 days after your surgery. The buyer was a company, not an individual, some LLC connected to your daughter's husband. That's suspicious already. But the signature, he turned the papers around and pointed. "You see that? It was my name, Eleanor M. Brooks, but not quite. The M looped differently. The pen pressure was lighter. And something about the spacing looked off." "That's not mine," I said immediately. "I can prove it. I've signed hundreds of documents over the years, mortgage, taxes, bank checks." "That's exactly what I was thinking," he said. "If this is forged, we can challenge the sale. But first, we'll need to get a copy of the power of attorney she used." I swallowed hard. She keeps everything at her house. And after the way she spoke to me last time, I doubt she'll hand it over. Tom smiled faintly, the kind of smile old men give when they've seen every trick in the book. "That's why we'll ask for it formally. I'll draft a letter today requesting copies of all documents your daughter used to authorize the sale. Once she knows an attorney's involved, she'll tread more carefully." I nodded, though my chest felt tight. I never wanted a battle with my own child. But she'd left me no choice. As I left his office, the sun was high over the courthouse dome, and people bustled around carrying briefcases and coffee cups. Life moved on for them, just another Tuesday. For me, everything felt suspended, like I was walking through water, heavy and slow. I took another cab to the small apartment Denise had arranged for me. She'd left the key at the hospital's front desk in an envelope labeled Mom. That alone told me how cold things had become. The place was clean, sure, but it felt sterile. White walls, plastic blinds, not a single personal touch. A vase of fake flowers sat on the counter. My belongings?
None of them.
Even my old quilt, the one I'd sewn when Frank was still alive, was missing. I sat down on the edge of the unfamiliar bed and looked out the window. Downtown traffic hummed below, constant and distant. I thought about the quiet of my old neighborhood, the sound of crickets at dusk, the way the porch light glowed against the maple leaves. It hit me then. I'd lost more than a house. I'd lost my peace. That evening, I made myself tea, though the kettle was new and the taste felt wrong. I called Tom to see if he'd heard anything back.
"Not yet," he said.
But I sent the letter to both Denise and her husband's office. Give them 24 hours to respond. Meanwhile, don't sign or say anything else to them. We'll handle it through documentation. I thanked him, hung up, and sat in silence again. Every sound in that apartment echoed, the hum of the refrigerator, the faint ticking of a clock. It didn't feel like home. At around 6, my phone buzzed. It was Denise. I hesitated before answering, my stomach knotting up. "Mom?" Her voice was sharp. "Why did I just get a letter from a lawyer? Are you trying to start a legal fight?" I took a breath. "I just want to understand what happened, Denise. You sold my house while I was under anesthesia. I deserve to see the paperwork." She scoffed. "You're overreacting. It's done. You have money, you have a new place. Why can't you just be grateful?" "Because that wasn't your decision to make," I said quietly. There was a pause. Then her tone changed, colder, almost mocking. "You're not thinking clearly.
I'm your daughter, Mom.
Everything I've done is for your own good." I wanted to say so much about Frank, about what that house meant, but I realized nothing I said would matter. She'd made herself believe her own story. When she hung up, I felt more alone than ever. I stared at my reflection in the dark window, gray hair, tired eyes, and wondered when my own child had stopped seeing me as her mother and started seeing me as an inconvenience. The next morning, Tom called. "Eleanor, they sent something overnight." I just opened the envelope. "It's interesting." I gripped the phone tighter. "What is it?" "They sent a copy of the power of attorney you signed, or supposedly signed. But this version is different from the one I drafted years ago. It's been altered. The clause that limits it to medical decisions is gone, replaced by a line granting full authority over financial matters. My breath caught. Can she do that?
No.
Not without your consent, and definitely not after the fact. The problem is, she used a photocopy that looks official. The signature on this, too, doesn't match your real one. If we can prove both are forged, the sale can be reversed. I felt tears sting my eyes, not from sadness, but from relief. For the first time, I wasn't just a helpless old woman. I had truth on my side. Tom continued, I'm going to file an injunction today to freeze the property transfer until we settle this. It might get messy, Eleanor. Are you ready for that? I thought about it. About the maple tree, the smell of Frank's tobacco, the way the floors creaked under my slippers. Yes, I said. I've already lost too much to stop now. After the call, I sat with my cup of tea and watched sunlight spill across the counter. For a moment, I imagined Frank sitting beside me, nodding quietly like he used to when I stood up for myself. By noon, I decided to take a walk. My legs were still weak from the surgery, but I needed air. The city noise filled my ears. Horns, chatter, the hiss of buses. I missed the sound of birds. I passed a small park and sat on a bench. A woman about my age was feeding pigeons nearby. We nodded politely to each other, and I realized how easy it is to disappear in this world once people decide you're old. Around 1 o'clock, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was an unknown number. Mrs. Brooks, a man's voice said. This is Officer Lang from the County Fraud Division. Mr. Hamley referred your case to us. We'd like to ask you a few questions. For a second, I didn't breathe. Of course, I said finally. He asked me to come by the station later that afternoon with identification and any documents I still had. I didn't have much, just a copy of my old mortgage and my driver's license, but I gathered them carefully, slipping them into a folder like they were precious relics. At the station, Officer Lang was kind, young, with kind eyes and a patient voice. I'm sorry you're going through this, he said. Unfortunately, we see a lot of elder fraud cases involving family members. You're not alone. That last sentence, you're not alone, hit me harder than I expected. He asked me to sign a few papers, giving permission for them to investigate. We'll get a handwriting expert to examine the signatures, he explained. If your daughter forged them, that's a serious crime. But let's take it one step at a time. As I signed the forms, my pen didn't shake. My hand felt steady, stronger than it had in years. When I left the station, the afternoon sun was starting to dip. I stopped at a cafe on the corner for a sandwich and coffee. The young waiter smiled politely, called me ma'am, and I almost laughed at how ordinary the world still was while my life was unraveling. I looked out the window as people hurried by, and I thought, maybe that's the trick of getting older. The world keeps moving, but sometimes you have to fight to make it stop long enough to hear your own heartbeat. I took a sip of coffee and whispered to myself, one signature changed everything. But now, maybe, it could change it back. When I got back to the apartment, dusk had settled outside, the kind of soft, blue-gray light that makes everything look like it's holding its breath. I turned on the small lamp beside the bed and sat for a moment, letting the quiet sink in. I'd spent my entire life trusting paperwork. When you work at a bank for 3 decades, you learn that everything in life, homes, promises, marriages, can come down to a signature. Now, mine was being used against me. The phone rang around 6. It was Tom again. His voice sounded steadier this time, almost hopeful. Eleanor, we've made progress. The county recorder's office froze the sale temporarily while they verify the signatures. The buyers can't take possession or resell it until we're done. My heart leapt a little. So that means my house is safe? For now, yes, he said. But we'll need your cooperation. The investigator wants to meet with you tomorrow morning to compare handwriting samples. I'll be there with you. After that, we can petition the court to nullify the transaction if the forgery's confirmed. I thanked him, but my relief was mixed with sadness. I'd hoped Denise might call, maybe to apologize, maybe just to speak like a daughter again. But there was nothing. Only silence. After dinner, a can of soup and some crackers, I found myself wandering the apartment, opening drawers, searching for pieces of myself that weren't there. No framed photos, no familiar smells, no creak in the floorboards where the hall met the kitchen. I felt like a ghost living in someone else's life. I sat by the window again, looking out at the streetlights blinking to life. Somewhere down below, a couple laughed as they crossed the sidewalk. That sound, laughter, made something ache deep inside me. I remembered a night years ago when Frank and I hosted a backyard barbecue. Denise was still in college then, bright and full of plans. She danced barefoot on the lawn, twirling under the string lights while Frank clapped along. She used to call him Pops. She used to love us. I wondered where that girl went. The knock on the door startled me. It was firm, almost impatient. When I opened it, Denise stood there, her arms crossed and her lips tight. "Mom, what are you doing?" she said, stepping inside without waiting to be invited.
I ser det her.
I could ask you the same thing. Why did you get lawyers involved? You're making this ugly. People are asking questions at Paul's office. Because you sold my home, Denise. My voice trembled, but I held her gaze. You forged my name. Do you realize that's a crime? She laughed, a short, bitter sound. Oh, come on. Nobody's going to arrest their own daughter. You should be thanking me. You couldn't handle that house anymore. I didn't ask for your help, I said quietly. She looked around the apartment, clearly irritated. This is exactly why I did it. Look at you, all alone in a big old place, tripping on stairs. You don't think I worried about you? I felt my throat tighten. If you were worried, you would have talked to me. You wouldn't have lied. Her jaw clenched. You don't understand the world anymore, Mom. Things move fast now. You can't hang on to the past forever. I'm not hanging on to the past, I said, taking a slow breath. I'm hanging on to what's right. She rolled her eyes. You'll ruin everything. Paul's already furious. The sale's in his company's name, and the buyer's expecting possession next week. If this deal collapses, he'll lose his job. Do you want that on your conscience? I stared at her, at the hardness in her face, the defensiveness in her voice, and realized I didn't recognize her anymore. Somewhere along the way, she'd traded kindness for convenience. Denise, I said softly, I raised you to tell the truth. To earn what you have, not take it. She looked away. For a moment, I thought I saw her eyes glisten, but then she straightened her shoulders. I did what needed to be done. You'll thank me one day. No, I said, you'll thank me when this is over and you understand what you've done. She huffed, turned on her heel, and slammed the door behind her. The sound echoed through the apartment, rattling something inside me. I sank into the chair by the table, exhausted. My hands shook, but not from fear, from anger I'd carried too long in silence. After she left, I called Tom again. She came by. I told him. She's panicking. Said her husband's company owns the buyer. He paused. That's what I suspected. They probably used his business to move the property quickly and pocket the money before you noticed. That could make it worse for them legally. What happens next? I asked. We'll request the original sale file from the title company. If the notary signature or stamp was falsified, that's another layer of fraud. Don't worry, Eleanor. These things take time, but the law is on your side. I thanked him and hung up, though the weight in my chest didn't lift. I didn't want revenge. I wanted understanding. I wanted my daughter back. But it felt like we'd crossed a line we could never walk back over. I tried reading for a while, but the words blurred. So instead, I opened the small box I'd brought from the hospital, the only personal item I had left. Inside was a photo of Frank holding Denise when she was a baby. His eyes sparkled the way they always did when he smiled. I touched the edge of the photo gently, tracing their faces. You'd know what to do, I whispered to him. At around 8, my phone buzzed again, a text this time, from an unknown number. You don't know what you're getting into. Drop it before it gets worse. My stomach dropped. The message had no name, but I didn't need one.
Paul.
I took a screenshot and sent it to Tom immediately. He replied within minutes. Don't respond. I'll inform the investigator. That message will help our case. It was strange. The very threats meant to scare me only made me steadier. Every cruel word, every betrayal, just confirmed I was doing the right thing. I made myself another cup of tea, letting the steam rise into the room. Outside, the city lights flickered like distant stars. Somewhere out there, Denise was probably sitting in her new living room, convinced she'd won. But what she didn't know was that one signature, that small piece of paper she thought she could forge and forget, was the very thing that could unravel everything she'd built on lies. By 9, I was exhausted but couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind circling memories. The day we bought the house, the Christmas mornings by the fireplace, Frank's laughter echoing down the hall. They felt like another lifetime. I must have drifted off because I woke to the sound of my phone vibrating on the nightstand. It was nearly midnight. Another message, this time from Tom. Good news, the title company just confirmed the notary stamp used on the deed isn't valid. We're meeting at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Bring your ID. We're close, Eleanor. I smiled in the dark. Not because I wanted to win, but because for the first time, justice didn't feel like something distant or abstract. It felt like standing up, like breathing freely again. I turned off the lamp and closed my eyes. I thought about how strange it is you can spend your whole life teaching your children right from wrong, only to end up teaching them one last lesson when they try to test you. I whispered softly into the dark, almost as if Frank could hear me. I'm not done fighting yet. The refrigerator hummed quietly in the next room. The clock ticked steady on the wall. Somewhere beyond the window, dawn was only a few hours away. And for the first time in a long while, I felt ready to face it. Morning light crept through the blinds in narrow stripes, cutting across the floor like ribbons of gold. I hadn't meant to fall asleep, but somehow I did. And when I woke, the first thing I felt wasn't exhaustion. It was purpose. I got dressed slowly, choosing my blue sweater, the one Frank always said brought out the color in my eyes. I packed my purse carefully, sliding my ID and the small folder of old documents inside. Every movement felt deliberate, measured. By 8:30, I was outside waiting for the cab. The air had that crisp edge of late autumn, and the trees lining the sidewalk had started to turn. Their leaves, amber, red, and pale yellow, swirled around my shoes as I stepped off the curb. The drive downtown was quiet. I watched the city unfold through the window. Brick buildings, early risers walking dogs, a man sweeping the front of a bakery. For a moment, I thought about stopping for coffee, but my nerves wouldn't allow it. When we arrived at the title office, Tom was already there, standing near the glass doors. He gave me a reassuring smile. You ready? As ready as I'll ever be, I said. Inside, the office was bright and sterile, white walls, tidy desks, and the faint smell of toner and coffee. The investigator, a woman named Carol, greeted me politely. She looked to be in her 50s, with sharp eyes softened by kindness. Mrs. Reynolds, she said, extending her hand. We've been reviewing your case. I'll need to ask you a few questions and have you sign some sample forms for comparison. Is that all right? Of course, I replied. We sat down at a conference table. Carol spread out several sheets of paper, copies of the deed, signature cards, and notarized forms. My name appeared in each one, written neatly, but slightly off. The loops in the R were too narrow, the slant too sharp. I pointed to one of them. That's not me, I said. I never sign my last name without crossing the T high like this. I demonstrated on the blank page she'd given me. She nodded. Exactly what I noticed. The handwriting on these documents doesn't match your legal signature from your banking records. And the notary ID used here belongs to a woman who retired 3 years ago. Her stamp should have been deactivated. Tom leaned forward. So, this confirms the forgery? Almost, Carol said. We'll need to file an affidavit and submit these findings to the recorder's office. Once that's done, the sale will be officially voided pending legal action. But from what I see here, Mrs. Reynolds, you have a very strong case. My chest swelled with relief. Thank you, I said quietly. Carol smiled. You'd be surprised how often families do this sort of thing. But not everyone fights back. I'm glad you did. Her words lingered with me long after we left the building. Outside, Tom offered to buy me breakfast at a nearby diner. I agreed, more for the company than the food. We sat by the window, and I ordered oatmeal and coffee while he scrolled through his phone. He looked up suddenly. You might want to see this, he said, turning the screen toward me. There it was, an online real estate listing for my house. Under contract, pending sale. My stomach turned as I stared at the familiar living room, staged with furniture that wasn't mine. My rose curtains were gone, replaced by sterile white drapes. Even the kitchen looked different. Someone had stripped away all the warmth Frank and I built there. That's my home, I whispered. Tom nodded. It'll be taken down soon. Once we file today's report, the platform has to remove fraudulent listings. I sipped my coffee, letting the bitterness ground me. You know, I said after a moment, I used to think losing the house would destroy me. But now I realize it's not the walls or the floors I'm fighting for. It's what they represent. And what's that? He asked. Respect, I said simply. It's about not letting someone take away your dignity just because they think you're too old to fight back. He smiled faintly. You remind me of my grandmother. Tough as nails. I laughed softly. Maybe that's what keeps us alive. Stubbornness. After breakfast, Tom drove me back to the apartment. We parked out front, and before I got out, he said, Eleanor, there's one more thing. If Denise or her husband contact you again, don't engage. We'll handle everything through legal channels. Let the paper trail speak. I nodded. I understand, but part of me still wanted to hear from her. Not as a lawyer's client, as her mother. The day stretched on quietly. I spent the afternoon organizing my few belongings, making lists of what I needed to recover once the house was legally mine again. Around 3, the phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. Mrs. Reynolds, a man's voice said. This is Detective Harris from the County Fraud Division. I wanted to let you know we've received the investigator's report. There's clear evidence of forgery, and we'll be moving forward with questioning your daughter and her husband. I froze. Questioning? Yes, ma'am. Standard procedure. You won't need to come in unless we require a formal statement. But I wanted you to know you did the right thing. After we hung up, I sat in silence for a long time. The right thing. Why did the right thing hurt so much? Evening settled in slowly. I made tea and sat by the window again, the same way I had the night before. Outside, the street was alive with distant sounds, cars passing, laughter from the building next door, the faint bark of a dog. Life kept moving, no matter how heavy your heart felt. Around 6, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Denise. Mom, please. Can we talk? I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. If it's about the house, talk to my lawyer. A minute passed. Then another message appeared. It's not about that. I didn't think it would go this far. I'm scared. Something inside me softened. Not enough to forget, but enough to listen. Then meet me, I wrote. Public place. The park across from the house at 7. The air was cool when I arrived. The park sat quiet, leaves rustling across the paths. I saw her sitting on a bench, her arms wrapped around herself. When she saw me, she stood, eyes red and swollen. Mom, she said, her voice cracking. They came to the office today. The police. Paul's furious. He says I ruined everything. I took a slow breath. You did, I said gently. But you can make it right. She looked at me, trembling. I didn't mean to hurt you. Paul said it was just paperwork, that you'd be taken care of. I thought it was harmless. Harmless. I shook my head. You took the home your father and I built with our hands. You signed my name like it meant nothing. Tears streamed down her cheeks. I know, Mom. I messed up. I just wanted to start fresh, and Paul said we needed the money. But now he's blaming me for everything.
He sat beside her.
Denise, I said softly, you're my daughter. I love you, but love doesn't mean I'll protect you from the truth. She looked at me confused. So what happens now? I don't know, I said honestly. But I know this, every choice we make leaves a mark. You can't undo what you've done, but you can face it. She nodded slowly, wiping her eyes. Will you forgive me? I hesitated, then reached out and took her hand. Forgiveness isn't something you ask for, Denise. It's something you earn. And maybe one day, when you've made things right, I'll find it in me. We sat there for a long moment, neither of us speaking. The wind picked up, scattering leaves across the path. Finally, she stood. I'm sorry, she whispered and walked away. I watched her go, her figure fading into the distance. And though my heart ached, there was a strange calm that followed, the kind that comes when you've done everything you can. I walked home slowly, the streetlights flickering on as I reached the building. Inside, the air felt warmer, softer somehow. I poured myself a glass of water and looked at the photo of Frank again. Well, I murmured, I think we're getting our house back. The clock on the wall ticked toward 8. I smiled faintly and whispered to the viewers in my mind, the ones who'd listen to this story later. If you're still watching, don't forget to subscribe to her revenge stories. And tell me, have you ever had to stand up for yourself when no one thought you could? I'd love to know. Outside, the wind carried the faint scent of rain. Tomorrow, the paperwork would begin, and maybe justice, in its quiet, steady way, would finally take shape. That night, I didn't sleep much. Every time I closed my eyes, memories crept in, birthdays in that old living room, Frank painting the porch railings, Denise running through the sprinkler as a child. It all felt too close and too far at once. Around midnight, I got up and made tea. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound in the apartment. I sat at the small kitchen table and stared at the folder in front of me, the one with all my documents, my proof, my piece of truth. One signature. That's all it took to tear my life apart. But now, one signature might be what stitched it back together. By morning, the sky was pale gray, clouds hanging low over the rooftops. I got dressed early, slipped the folder into my purse, and headed downstairs. The world outside smelled of wet pavement, the kind of scent that lingers after a light rain. When the cab pulled up, I gave the driver the address of the county recorder's office. Today, I would sign the affidavit Carol had prepared. That single act, pen meeting paper, would set everything officially in motion. The building was older than I remembered, with marble floors and echoing hallways that smelled faintly of paper and dust. A receptionist directed me to room 212. Inside, Carol was waiting with a stack of forms. "Morning, Mrs. Reynolds," she said warmly. "You made good time." "I've been waiting for this day," I told her, taking a seat. She handed me the first document. "This is your affidavit of ownership. Once you sign, we'll record it with the county and start the formal process of restoring your deed. It'll also freeze any further transactions on the property until the case is resolved." My hands trembled slightly as I picked up the pen. It was just ink on paper, but to me, it felt heavier than anything I'd ever held. I signed my name carefully, Eleanor M. Reynolds, the same way I'd done it for over 70 years. "There," I whispered. "That's mine." Carol smiled. "And with that, Mrs. Reynolds, your house is officially protected." I exhaled slowly. For the first time in weeks, I felt a weight lift off my chest. As we wrapped up, she added gently, "You might want to prepare for some pushback. Your daughter and her husband will be contacted for statements. It might get tense." "I understand," I said. But I'm not backing down. Walking out of that office, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: control. The clouds outside had started to part, sunlight filtering through like soft gold. I tilted my face toward it, letting the warmth touch my skin. Tom called as I was stepping into the cab. "You did it." "I did,"
I said.
Signed and sealed. He chuckled. Good. Now it's just a matter of time. We agreed to meet later that afternoon at his office to go over next steps. I spent the drive staring out the window, watching life move around me, people hurrying to work, children laughing near a school bus, a man walking hand in hand with his wife. The world didn't know what I was carrying inside, and somehow that made it feel even more personal. When I arrived at Tom's office, he greeted me with 2 cups of coffee. Black, just how you take it. Thank you, I said, smiling faintly. We went over the documents again, and he explained the upcoming timeline, the fraud investigation, the property hold, the eventual court hearing. It all sounded so formal, yet every step brought me closer to reclaiming the life I'd built. By the time we finished, it was nearing lunchtime. I told him I wanted to see the house just one more time. He hesitated. It's still technically occupied by the buyers. The sale hasn't been reversed yet. I know, I said. I won't go inside. I just need to see it.
He nodded.
I'll drive you.
We rode in silence.
The closer we got, the tighter my chest felt. When we turned onto the familiar street, my breath caught. There it was, the little white house with the green shutters, just as I'd left it, yet somehow different. The porch railing Frank had painted was chipped now. The roses I'd planted by the steps were overgrown. A new car sat in the driveway, but the heart of the place, the feeling of it, was still mine. I asked Tom to pull over across the street. We sat quietly, watching the house in silence. You know, I said softly, every memory I have lives inside those walls. Every holiday, every argument, every laugh. They thought they could sell it off like an old piece of furniture. But you can't sell history.
Tom looked over at me.
No, you can't. And you're doing something a lot of people never find the courage to do, standing up to your own family. I smiled sadly. Sometimes the people who hurt you most are the ones you gave everything to. We sat there for a few more minutes before I asked him to take me back. As we drove, I felt both sadness and peace. The house would be mine again soon, but something deeper had already changed inside me. Back at the apartment, I made lunch, a small sandwich and a bowl of soup, and sat by the window as I ate. My phone buzzed twice, but I ignored it. I needed a quiet moment to let everything settle. Around 2, the landline rang. It was the detective again. Mrs. Reynolds, I wanted to inform you that we've spoken with your daughter. She's been cooperative so far. She confirmed that her husband was the one who forged your signature. I felt a rush of mixed emotion, relief, sadness, and a strange ache that went beyond anger. Will there be charges? I asked quietly. Possibly. But if she continues to cooperate, and if you don't wish to pursue maximum penalties, the judge may consider leniency. It's ultimately your decision. I was silent for a moment. Thank you for letting me know, I said finally. When I hung up, I stared at the phone for a long while. What did I want? Justice, yes, but not destruction. Denise had made terrible choices, but she was still my child. The ache in my chest told me that even when you win, loss finds its way in. Later that afternoon, I decided to take a walk. The air had grown warmer, the clouds thinning out. The sidewalks were damp, reflecting bits of sky in shallow puddles. I passed a few familiar faces, neighbors, shopkeepers, and exchanged quiet greetings. It felt grounding to be among people who didn't know my story, who saw just another woman walking home. By evening, I was back in the apartment, sitting in my chair with a blanket over my knees. I poured myself a small glass of wine, not to celebrate, exactly, but to mark the day. The day my name, my real, rightful name, went back where it belonged. I turned on the small TV in the corner, half listening to the evening news. My mind drifted to the viewers who might one day hear this story. I could almost see them, people sitting in their living rooms, maybe holding a cup of tea, maybe nodding along because they'd been through something too. If you're still here, I said softly, imagining the words as if I were recording, don't forget to subscribe to her revenge stories. Tell me where you're watching from. I always love knowing that someone out there understands. Outside, The streetlight flickered on. I watched it glow through the curtains, steady and soft. Somewhere deep inside, I knew this wasn't over. There would be court dates and conversations, maybe even more heartache. But the hardest part, the part where I found my courage again, that was already done. I finished my wine, set the glass down, and looked at the stack of papers on the counter. The top page held my signature, clean, honest mine. That one signature changed everything. And as I turned off the light and let the city hum lull me toward sleep, I whispered into the dark, "Frank, I think you'd be proud of me." The next morning began quietly, with the hum of the heater and the soft glow of light filtering through thin curtains. I sat up slowly, feeling the stiffness in my knees, but also something new: peace. The kind that doesn't shout or demand attention. Just a calm acknowledgement that you've survived something difficult and come out whole. I brewed a pot of coffee and let the smell fill the apartment. The radio played softly in the background, a local station, the kind that still read the weather and announced birthdays for folks in town. As I listened, I smiled to myself. The world was still moving. Life didn't pause, not even for heartbreak or redemption. Around 9, there was a knock on my door. When I opened it, Tom stood there, holding a manila envelope and 2 cups of coffee. "Morning, Eleanor," he said. "You've got mail." "Mail." He smiled. "Official kind." We sat at the table, and I carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a letter from the county clerk, confirmation that the forged deed had been nullified. My ownership had been reinstated. My home was legally, fully, irrevocably mine again. For a long time, I didn't say a word. I just stared at the paper, my eyes tracing the embossed seal, the neat type, the words that had once been stolen from me. Owner of record, Eleanor May Reynolds. "It's over," I said quietly. Tom nodded. "You did it." I laughed softly. "I suppose I did. Though it feels strange, doesn't it? Winning something you should have never lost in the first place." He smiled. "Sometimes justice just means getting back to zero." I nodded, taking a slow sip of coffee. Zero feels good today. For the next hour, we talked about small things: the weather, his grandkids, how his wife wanted to plant tulips this spring. It felt nice, ordinary. After he left, I sat for a while longer, looking at the letter on the table. Then I picked up the phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. Denise answered on the 3rd ring. Her voice was quiet. "Mom, it's me," I said. "I got the letter this morning. It's done." A pause. "I heard," she whispered. "They called Paul in again. He's furious. He said I ruined everything." "And did you?" I asked softly. "I guess I did," she said, voice trembling. "I thought I was fixing things, but I only made them worse." I took a slow breath. The truth has a way of doing that. It clears out everything you've been trying to hide. Are you angry with me?" she asked. I thought about that for a long time. "I was," I said finally. "But anger only makes the wound stay open. I don't want to live like that anymore." She started to cry. "I don't expect you to forgive me." "I know," I said. "But I do hope you learn from it. Because someday, you'll be my age. And you'll realize that the things we take from people, trust, love, security, they don't come back easily." There was another pause. Then, softly, she said, "I love you, Mom." "I love you too, Denise," I said. "Even when it hurts." When we hung up, I let the silence fill the room again. It wasn't heavy anymore. It was peaceful, almost cleansing. I packed a small tote bag and called a cab. I was going home. The drive there felt different this time. Familiar streets, now free of dread. When the car turned onto my block, I felt my breath catch again, but this time, it wasn't from fear. It was relief. The for sale sign was gone. The windows were closed. The yard looked quiet, untouched. I paid the driver and stepped out, my shoes crunching against the gravel. When I reached the porch steps, I hesitated. My hand hovered over the doorknob, and for a moment, I just stood there, the past and present colliding like overlapping shadows. Then I turned the key. The door creaked open, and the scent hit me first. Faintly musty, but familiar. My home smelled like old wood, soap, and something else, memory. I stepped inside slowly, the sound of my shoes echoing across the empty floor. Everything was different. The new owners had left quickly after the legal reversal. Furniture gone, walls bare, curtains stripped away. But beneath it all, it was still my house. My fingerprints were in the grooves of the door frames, my laughter buried in these walls. I walked room to room, running my hand along the walls. The kitchen counters still bore faint scratches from years of use. The corner of the living room still had that uneven floorboard Frank never got around to fixing. I smiled when I found it. In the back hallway, I noticed something sitting on the floor, a small, worn photograph that must have slipped through during the rush. I picked it up carefully. It was a picture of Denise, maybe 10 years old, with Frank holding her on his shoulders, both of them laughing. My throat tightened. I carried the picture to the living room and set it gently on the mantel. "You see, Frank?" I whispered. We made it back. The afternoon sunlight poured through the windows, warming the hardwood floor. I opened one of the windows, and the breeze carried in the scent of the garden, faint roses, still alive somehow, even after all this. I made tea in the quiet. Every movement felt sacred, the kettle filling, the spoon clinking, the soft whistle of steam. When I finally sat down at the kitchen table, I exhaled deeply, as if releasing everything that had been trapped inside me for months. For a while, I just sat there, listening to the house breathe. It struck me how fragile everything was: a life, a home, a name. You spend decades building something, and in one moment, someone can try to erase it. But paper can't erase love. Greed can't erase history. And time has a funny way of revealing the truth. The doorbell rang around 3. When I opened it, a young delivery driver handed me a small box. "Mrs. Reynolds?" he asked. "That's me," I said. He smiled. "Certified delivery from the county clerk's office. They said it's your official title packet. Congratulations." I thanked him and closed the door. Inside the box was a thick envelope, my updated property deed, sealed and stamped. I ran my fingers over it, tracing the embossed lettering. The legal world had a way of making things cold and distant, but this felt personal. One signature had stolen everything from me, and one signature, mine, had brought it all back. As the day began to fade, I opened the back door and stepped onto the porch. The sunset was soft and golden, the air cool against my face. Somewhere down the street, I heard children laughing, and for a moment, everything felt right again. I thought about calling Denise, but instead, I just whispered a quiet prayer. That she'd find her way, that she'd learn from the pain, that maybe someday she'd come home not to take, but to visit. When I went back inside, I turned on the small lamp near the couch. The light filled the room with a gentle glow. I sat down and looked around, at the bare walls, the empty shelves, the quiet that felt alive now instead of lonely. And I smiled. To whoever's listening out there, I said softly, imagining my voice reaching the kind ears of strangers across the country, don't ever let anyone convince you that you're too old to start over. Don't let them make you believe you don't matter. Because as long as your name is your own, your story isn't over yet. I leaned back, taking a deep breath. If you're still here, make sure to subscribe to her revenge stories. And tell me, have you ever fought for something that was yours, even when everyone said to give up? I'd love to hear it. The tea had gone cold, but I didn't mind. The house creaked softly, almost like it was sighing in relief too. Outside, the streetlights flickered on one by one. The world went on turning. And there I sat, a 74-year-old woman in her reclaimed home, holding a paper that proved not just ownership, but endurance. Because sometimes the smallest act, a single pen stroke, a quiet signature, can change everything.